You all have extensive backgrounds, an extensive amount of experience. This is not a fun process to be able to go through for anyone and for your families. So thanks for stepping up to be able to engage, agree or disagree on this. It's a difficult process for any American to go through, and it is very real public service. So thanks for your engagement at this point and in the questions you've already answered in the process that you've already walked through on this. Traditionally, in nominations hearings for an archivist positions and D.C. judicial nominations is quite frankly a pretty sleepy hearing as we walk through all the different issues and just a basic process because they've gone through. Obviously, there are some new issues that have arisen of late on this. The position of the archivist, and by the way, Dr. Shogun and I have had this conversation as recently as yesterday on the proper pronunciation of is archivist or archivist. And since she prefers the term archivist and she's being nominated for the position, we'll stick with her pronunciation of it as well. But the position of the archivist typically is one that's a nonpartisan position that there's not a lot of attention to. But there are two new issues that are fairly recent that have drawn a lot of attention to the National Archives on this, and I want to be able to mention both those. The federal courts and the Office of Legal Counsel of the Department of Justice have both been very, very clear on the Equal Rights Amendment. That amendment went through the process constitutionally and had an expiration on that. But for whatever reason, there are some activists that have risen up and declared that the archivist can just unilaterally declare that part of the Constitution. The former archivist stated that the National Archives refers to the Department of Justice on this issue, will abide by the Office of Legal Counsel opinion unless otherwise directed by a final court order. Over this past year, that has still put the National Archives at the center of that controversy on that. And so today is the day we need to be able to clarify this well, where the National Archives will continue to be able to move forward with the statutes and the law and how the constitutional process works. There's also obviously been an issue on the return of presidential records, which escalated to the point that the personal residence of former President Donald Trump was searched by the FBI, an absolutely unprecedented step. That was an initial request from the National Archives for records. Then a search was carried out by the FBI. There's been a lot of questions about how that happened, what were the requests, what requests were accepted or denied. This is something that Senator Scott and I have both written a letter to the chairman to try to get some sort of briefing on this. There was a briefing that then happened on what happened since the Mar-a-Lago raid, but there still hasn't been information from the National Archives on what has actually occurred, what led to that moment. It is a very unprecedented moment. Obviously, the current nominee was not the archivist at that point and can't answer the questions from before, but there'll still be a lot of questions about transparency and what occurs. For an agency and an entity that is responsible for holding records and making those records publicly available, one of the questions we'll have is what was the process leading up to this search? And are those records going to be publicly available like every other record is publicly available through the National Archives? Turning to the District of Columbia, thank you again for engaging in this. All of you have extensive background in the law, and look forward to the questions and the issues on this. You are walking into a time where we absolutely need additional judges in the District of Columbia, and we need folks that are going to just simply follow the law on this. There's also an ongoing conversation that the chairman and I have had on this as well, working with the mayor of D.C., because months ago, 5 preborn children their remains were taken in by D.C. police, Metropolitan Police. They were recovered. They were very late term, and they were identified to be connected to a Washington surgery clinic. In the District of Columbia, partial birth abortions are illegal, like they are everywhere else in the country. These children had every appearance of being victims of a partial birth abortion, and so we've had some very careful questions of the District of Columbia saying, how are you investigating this? What's the process when you discover this kind of action is actually taking place in the District of Columbia? We've engaged with the mayor to try to get answers to how the questions on this and what they're actually doing to be able to follow through, but instead the mayor's office has simply responded that they're going after the whistleblower in this case, and that they're turning the whistleblower in instead of actually investigating the death of these children. And so we're asking some very straightforward questions, and we'll continue to be able to ask those straightforward questions. And we plan to be able to get answers from the mayor's office. What is the plan in the days ahead when you discover the possibility that there is a crime being committed in the District of Columbia? Obviously, all of you We'll one day be hearing cases that'll be very difficult, emotional cases like that in the days ahead. And so I'm going to continue to be able to press this issue and continue to be able to press the mayor's office to be able to be engaged. In the meantime, I'm going to continue to be able to work on our nominees and the process there to be able to get through, assuming that the mayor is going to be responsive at some point, and continue to use the only leverage that I have in the meantime to be able to have a responsive nature. In the District of Columbia, the law has to be enforced as it does everywhere else in the country. We just want consistency and enforcement of the law. And I think that's a fairly reasonable request to be able to work through, and we'll continue to be able to have that dialogue. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing. These are important people to be able to engage with, and I look forward to the dialogue and answering questions.